The city was alive with the hum of late-night traffic, a constant thrum that never quite stopped, even when the stars blinked silently above. The fluorescent lights in the office building flickered one last time as Claire closed her laptop and packed her bag. She had been working for hours, no days, without rest, but this night something was different. Her usual tired smile was nowhere to be found. There was only a hollow weariness behind her eyes, the kind that told stories she hadn't spoken out loud. And that was exactly why Ryan Matthews, CEO of Matthews Enterprises, had been watching her. Ryan had always been an astute observer. It was how he had built his empire from the ground up, with sharp instincts and an uncanny ability to understand people. But Claire was different. She was quiet, hard-working, but there was an edge to her, a hidden layer he couldn't quite decipher. It wasn't the first time he'd noticed her working late, but tonight something had caught his attention. Earlier that afternoon, when everyone else had taken their lunch break, Claire had slipped quietly into the break room, her eyes darting around as if making sure no one saw her. She didn't eat. She only reached into her bag and pulled out a crumpled receipt, a note, and a few dollars. Then she tucked them into her bag as if it were no big deal, but to Ryan, it was a huge deal. He had seen something in her eyes that told him she was hiding something. Claire, the loyal employee who never complained, had asked for food, but not for herself. She had asked for food for someone else. Ryan didn't know why it bothered him. Maybe it was because he could sense she wasn't just another employee who came in, worked, and left. She had a story, one he couldn't quite figure out yet. So when she left the office at 9 p.m., walking briskly out the door with the same tired look, Ryan decided to follow her. He told himself it was because he was concerned about her well-being, but deep down, he knew it was more than that. He had to understand. There was something hidden beneath her calm exterior, something that didn't fit the neat, polished life of an employee at Matthews Enterprises. He followed her from a distance, keeping to the shadows as Claire's figure moved down the crowded city street. The noise of the city was like a blanket, muffling everything around him, but Ryan's senses were razor-sharp. He could hear the faint sound of her footsteps echoing against the pavement. The night air was cool, and as they turned down a quieter street, the city lights faded into the background, leaving only the flickering streetlights to illuminate the way. Claire was walking fast, her pace quickening as she moved farther from the downtown area. Ryan's curiosity grew with each step. He had no idea where she was headed, but she had a destination in mind. He was sure of that. And then, as if she had sensed his presence, Claire stopped. She turned her head, scanning the empty street behind her. For a split second, Ryan froze, his heart pounding in his chest. Was she aware of him following her? His fingers gripped the corner of a nearby building, and he stayed perfectly still. After what felt like an eternity, Claire turned back around and continued walking. She didn't stop, didn't look back again. But her body language had changed. There was something more purposeful now, more determined in her movements. She was headed to a part of the city Ryan didn't recognize, away from the brightly lit offices, away from the bustling businesses and the comfortable world of Matthews Enterprises. As they turned another corner, Ryan's heart skipped a beat. The street was darker now, the buildings less well kept, their facades crumbling with time. The hum of the city was distant here, replaced by the occasional sound of a car passing by or a distant shout. Claire stopped in front of a small building, its windows boarded up, the door marked with peeling paint. She paused, then glanced around, once more checking for anyone nearby. Ryan's stomach twisted. There was something about the place, something he couldn't quite put his finger on. Claire walked toward the door, her hand outstretched. Ryan felt a rush of adrenaline. This was it, the moment he would find out what Claire was hiding. He moved quickly, silently, his shoes barely making a sound against the cracked pavement. Claire pushed open the door with a creak, stepping inside. Ryan hesitated. He could hear muffled voices coming from within, low, indistinct, but unmistakable. He couldn't make out the words, but the tone was tense, urgent. Ryan's curiosity surged. He knew he had to go in. He couldn't turn back now. He pushed open the door just enough to slip through unnoticed. The dim light from inside barely reached the entryway, but Ryan could see enough to know it was some kind of warehouse. The air was thick with dust and stale air, and the smell of old wood and metal lingered in the space. Claire was standing at the far side, talking to a man. The man was tall, with scruffy hair and a weathered face. He looked out of place here, like he didn't belong. Ryan couldn't hear their conversation, but the body language spoke volumes. There was tension in the air, an unspoken agreement. Between them, Claire reached into her bag and pulled out a package, something wrapped in brown paper. She handed it to the man, who took it without a word. But as he did, he looked at her with something Ryan couldn't quite place. Gratitude? Fear? It was hard to tell. Ryan's heart raced. What was going on here? Why had Claire brought food to this man? Was he in some kind of trouble? And why hadn't she mentioned this to anyone at the office? Before he could step forward, the man turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows. Claire stood there for a moment, her shoulders slumped, as if the weight of the night had caught up with her. She took a deep breath, wiped a hand across her face, and turned back toward the door. Ryan quickly ducked behind a stack of boxes, his pulse racing in his ears. Claire was coming back. He had to be careful. As she stepped out of the building and into the cool night air, Ryan waited for a beat, then followed at a distance. She didn't look back this time, her footsteps steady and unhurried. But Ryan couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. The woman he had been observing for weeks, the quiet, hard-working employee, was not who he thought she was. She had a life outside of work, a world he hadn't seen. And whatever that world was, it was far darker and more complicated than anything he had imagined. He kept walking, his mind racing with questions. What had Claire been doing here? Who was the man she'd met with? And why hadn't she told anyone at the office about this side of her life? As they neared the street corner, Ryan's thoughts were interrupted by a sharp noise. A car screeched to a halt just ahead of them, the headlights blinding. A figure stepped out of the car, another man. This time the figure wasn't just passing by, he was looking directly at Claire. Ryan's pulse quickened. Was Claire in trouble? What was going on? As the figure approached her, Claire froze, her body stiffening. The man spoke to her in low, urgent tones, but Ryan couldn't make out the words. Claire didn't respond at first. She just stood there, her back to Ryan, her face unreadable. Then, before he could react, Claire turned and walked away, leaving the man standing there, his gaze following her retreating figure. Ryan took a step forward, but stopped himself. Something told him to stay hidden. Something told him that what he had just witnessed was more than he could handle, and that the answers he sought wouldn't be so easily found. As Claire disappeared into the night, Ryan stood still, his thoughts spiraling. He had come here tonight to uncover a secret, but now he realized something even more disturbing. He was just beginning to scratch the surface. The days that followed were a whirlwind of confusion for Ryan Matthews. He couldn't get the image of Claire out of his head. The quiet woman who worked tirelessly, never complained, and had secretly been carrying a hidden burden he never expected. The alley, the strange man, and the food wrapped in brown paper haunted him. But what bothered him the most was the feeling of helplessness that gnawed at him every time he thought about it. He spent hours replaying the scene in his mind. What had been exchanged between Claire and the man? What had driven her to do this? His mind was consumed with questions, none of which seemed to have any clear answers. He knew he had to confront her, but how? He couldn't just walk into her office and ask, "Why were you meeting a stranger in the middle of the night?" It sounded like something straight out of a conspiracy thriller, not a corporate drama. But Ryan couldn't stop himself. There was something about Claire, something that went beyond work and beyond the surface level of her perfectly polished professional persona. She had a secret life, and Ryan was determined to uncover it. For the next few days, he watched her more closely. She didn't know, of course. Ryan made sure to keep his distance, always careful not to draw attention to himself. He saw the way she interacted with others, always polite, always distant. There were moments when she seemed lost in thought, her eyes clouded with something more than just tiredness. One morning, after a late meeting, Ryan found himself walking out of the building at the same time Claire did. He hadn't planned it, but fate had a way of presenting itself in the strangest of ways. "Claire," Ryan called out before he could stop himself. She turned, her expression polite but guarded. "Mr. Matthews, good morning." Ryan studied her closely. There was a hint of wariness in her eyes. Had she caught on to the fact that he'd been watching her? "I didn't mean to disturb you," he said, trying to keep his tone casual. "I just wanted to say thank you for your hard work recently. You've been putting in a lot of hours." Claire nodded, her lips curling into a tight smile. "It's my job." There was something about her that felt off, a mask, perhaps, that she wore to protect herself. It was almost as if she was hiding behind her professionalism. "I appreciate it," Ryan said before adding, "but you know it's important to take care of yourself too. Rest is just as vital." She hesitated, glancing down at her feet before responding. "I'll be fine, Mr. Matthews, really." Her words were polite, but there was a subtle distance in her voice, one that Ryan couldn't ignore. It was clear she didn't want to talk about it, didn't want to be questioned, but something in her eyes, the way she avoided his gaze, told him there was more beneath the surface. As they stood there for a moment in awkward silence, Ryan struggled with the decision to press further. He couldn't. He didn't want to come off as intrusive, but he was too curious, too concerned. "All right," he said, trying to ease the tension. "I'll let you get back to it, but if you ever need anything—" "I know," she interrupted, softly, her tone quiet but firm. "Thank you." And with that, Claire turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. Ryan watched her leave, his mind spinning with possibilities. What was she hiding? And why was she so determined to keep it all locked away? Over the next few days, he tried to get closer to her. He found ways to run into her in the office, to ask about her projects, to engage her in small talk. It was nothing overt, just subtle ways to gauge her reactions, to see if she would drop any hints, any clues that might lead him to the truth. But each time he tried to peel back the layers of her life, she closed off. Claire wasn't just good at her job. She was exceptional at keeping her personal world a secret. Ryan began to feel like a detective in a case with no answers, no clues, no way forward. Then, one late afternoon, as the office started to empty out, Ryan's chance finally came. He had just finished a meeting when he noticed Claire sitting at her desk, hunched over a pile of paperwork. The office was mostly quiet now, the hum of the computers and the occasional rustle of papers the only sounds breaking the silence. The overhead lights cast a soft glow over her as she worked, but it was the way she was sitting, her shoulders tense, her hands moving quickly over the documents, that caught Ryan's attention. There was something frantic about the way she worked, as if she were trying to escape from something. He approached her desk slowly, trying not to startle her. "Claire?" She looked up at him, her face a mask of professionalism. "Mr. Matthews, is there something you need?" Her voice was calm, but there was an underlying edge to it, like a wall she had built around herself, one that Ryan couldn't get past. "I just wanted to check in on your progress with the new project," Ryan said, trying to sound casual. "Everything going well?" She nodded quickly, but Ryan noticed the way her fingers tightened around the papers. She was nervous, and that small, almost imperceptible sign was enough to tell him that something was wrong. "I'm making good progress," Claire said, her tone clipped. "It's just a lot of work." Ryan nodded, but his eyes never left her. He could sense she was holding something back, something important. "But what?" "I'm sure you are," he said gently. "But remember, if you need help, if there's anything you want to talk about, you can always reach out." Claire didn't respond immediately. Instead, she lowered her gaze, her hands still gripping the papers. Ryan could see the conflict in her eyes, the struggle between wanting to open up and the deep-seated need to protect herself. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Claire spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't need help, Mr. Matthews. I'm fine." Ryan knew better than to push her further. He could see it in her eyes. She wasn't ready to share her secrets. But he couldn't shake the feeling that she was lying, that there was something, someone, she was trying to protect. And that's when it hit him. The man, the one she had met in the alley, the one she had exchanged food with. Who was he? Ryan. Had to find out. Ryan Matthews had always prided himself on his ability to read people, to understand what they were really thinking, even when they tried to hide it behind a facade. But Claire was different. She was an enigma, a puzzle he couldn't seem to solve, no matter how hard he tried. Over the past few days, as he'd spent more time around her, he had begun to notice small, almost imperceptible details that only deepened his confusion. The way she kept to herself, the way she always seemed to be carrying an invisible burden, the way her eyes occasionally flashed with an emotion too complex to name, all of it pointed to something far more significant than a simple work life. Imbalance. Claire was hiding something, and Ryan was certain it was something he needed to uncover. He found himself more obsessed with her than he cared to admit. Every time they crossed paths in the office, he found himself watching her, trying to catch a glimpse of whatever truth she was so desperately trying to protect. He wanted to believe she was just a quiet, dedicated employee with a demanding job and little personal life. But the more he observed, the more he realized that there was a deeper story, one that ran far darker and more complicated than he could ever have imagined. It was late in the afternoon when Ryan received a call that would change everything. He had just finished a conference call with one of his major investors and was preparing to leave for the day when his phone rang. It was a number he didn't recognize. Hesitating for a moment, he picked it up. "Hello," Ryan said, his voice calm, even though his heart was racing. There was something about the unknown number that made him uneasy. "Mr. Matthews?" A raspy voice on the other end asked. "I need to talk to you about Claire." Ryan's pulse quickened. The voice was unfamiliar, but there was something urgent in its tone. "Who is this?" he demanded, his grip tightening around the phone. "It's not important who I am," the voice said quickly. "What matters is Claire. I know what you've been doing, watching her, following her, and I'm telling you, you need to stop." Ryan's mind spun as he processed the words. His first instinct was to hang up, to disregard the call as some sort of prank or hoax. But the intensity in the stranger's voice, the raw fear that was palpable through the phone, made him hesitate. "Stop," Ryan repeated. "What do you mean, stop? Who the hell are you?" Just listen," the voice said, growing more frantic. "Claire is in danger. She's in a situation you don't understand. And if you keep pushing, if you keep digging into her life, you'll only make things worse. Please, leave her alone. She's been through enough." Ryan felt a cold shiver crawl up his spine. "What kind of danger?" he asked, his voice dropping. This was no longer a simple matter of curiosity. This was real. Claire was in danger. The person on the other end didn't respond immediately. There was a long pause, a silence thick with something that felt like regret. Finally, the voice spoke again, its tone more measured now. "I can't tell you everything. Not yet. But trust me, there's more to Claire than you could ever guess." She's been through hell, and whatever you think you know, you're only seeing the tip of the iceberg. If you care about her at all, you'll leave her be." The line went dead before Ryan could respond. He stood there for a moment, staring at his phone, his mind racing with questions. Who was that? And what had they meant by "leave her be"? The stranger's warning weighed heavily on him, but it only fueled his desire to know more. He couldn't walk away now, not after hearing those words. Whatever Claire was involved in, it was far deeper than he had imagined. Ryan knew he had to act quickly. He couldn't wait any longer for the answers to come to him. He needed to take matters into his own hands. That night, after the office had emptied out and the streets were quiet, Ryan made his decision. He would follow Claire again, but this time he would be more cautious, more deliberate. He couldn't risk being seen, not after the warning he'd received. He had to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. He left the building, his footsteps echoing against the pavement as he walked toward the alley where he had first seen Claire. The streetlights flickered overhead, casting long shadows that made the city seem eerily quiet. Ryan's heart was pounding in his chest. What had the mysterious caller meant by danger? Was Claire truly in some kind of trouble? As he neared the alley, he slowed his pace, his eyes scanning the surroundings. There was no sign of Claire yet, but he wasn't about to take any chances. He ducked behind a large dumpster and waited, his breath coming in shallow bursts. After what felt like an eternity, he saw her. Claire appeared at the far end of the alley, walking briskly, her head down, as if she were trying to avoid being noticed. She looked tired, but there was something else in her posture, a sense of urgency, a fear she was trying to hide. Ryan's instincts kicked in. He knew now that whatever was going on with Claire, it was much bigger than he had realized. He had to follow her, but he had to be careful. He couldn't afford to make any mistakes. He kept a safe distance, moving quickly but quietly, his eyes never leaving her. She turned down another street, her pace quickening as she moved farther from the main roads. Ryan's heart raced as he followed, adrenaline flooding his veins. What was she doing? Where was she going? Finally, after several blocks, Claire stopped in front of an old building, the same building from before, the one she had visited the night he had followed her. His breath caught in his throat as he watched her disappear inside. Ryan hesitated for a moment, his mind racing. Should he follow her in? What if he was seen? But the fear of missing out on the truth, the need to understand what Claire was involved in, pushed him forward. He crept up to the door and tried to push it open, but it was locked. He glanced around, looking for another way in, and saw a narrow window at the side of the building. It was slightly ajar. Ryan didn't think twice. He climbed through the window, landing softly on the other side. The room he found himself in was dark, musty, and smelled of old wood. He could hear voices coming from the next room. They were low, but Ryan could make out the distinct sounds of Claire speaking. His heart raced as he moved closer to the door, pressing his ear against the cold wood. The conversation was hard to make out, but he could hear Claire's voice clearly now. "You don't understand," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "I don't have a choice. I have to do this. I have to protect them." Ryan's heart skipped a beat. Who was Claire protecting? What had she gotten herself into? He carefully pushed the door open just enough to peer inside. The sight that met him made his stomach drop. Claire was standing in front of the man he had seen before, the one she had met in the alley. But this time, he wasn't alone. There were two other men in the room with him, both of them looking at Claire with an intensity that made Ryan's blood run cold. One of the men stepped forward. "You've done well, Claire," he said, his voice low and gravelly. "But we need more from you. We need you to keep this up, to stay quiet. No more asking questions." Claire's shoulders slumped, but she didn't say anything. Ryan could see the fear in her eyes, the same fear he had seen when she had been walking down the street, the same fear that had been growing in his chest. You'll keep your mouth shut, won't you? The man pressed, his eyes narrowing. Claire nodded, her lips trembling. Ryan's mind raced. What was happening here? What had Claire gotten herself involved in? He didn't know, but he knew one thing for sure. This was far from over. Ryan Matthews hadn't expected to be here. The shadows that surrounded him now, the fear that gripped his chest, felt far removed from the life he had once known. He was no longer just a corporate CEO following a diligent employee. He was a man caught in the middle of something dark, something that had far-reaching consequences. The door to the room creaked as it closed behind him. Ryan froze, his heart pounding in his chest. Had they heard him? Were they coming for him? For a moment, everything stood still, the silence broken, only by the faint murmurs from the other side of the door. He stepped back, his mind racing. Should he run? Should he confront them? But his legs wouldn't move. The pull of curiosity, the need to know the truth, kept him rooted to the spot. He had to hear more, to understand the depths of the secret Claire had been keeping. There was a finality in the air now, a sense that if he didn't act, if he didn't confront this head-on, he might lose her forever. Slowly, Ryan moved further into the room, his eyes scanning the darkness. The sounds of Claire and the men talking grew louder, and he crept toward the door, careful not to make a sound. His hand hovered near the doorknob, but before he could turn it, someone touched his shoulder. Ryan spun around, his breath caught in his throat. "You're making a mistake," a voice hissed in the dark. It was Claire's. He stepped back, his mind reeling. Claire! She had been the one to catch him? Claire, what the hell is going on? He whispered, his voice trembling. She held her finger to her lips, signaling for him to be quiet. Her eyes were wide with panic, but there was also a strange resolve there. It was clear she was not the same woman who had worked diligently at her desk in the office. "Please," she begged, her voice barely above a whisper. "You need to leave. It's too dangerous. You shouldn't have followed me." Ryan shook his head, his chest tight with confusion and worry. "I couldn't just let it go. I need to know the truth, Claire. What is all this? What's really going on?" She took a deep breath, her face hardening with a mixture of fear and determination. "You don't understand. You have no idea what you're dealing with." Her words hit him like a cold wave. "I understand more than you think. You've been hiding something big, and whatever it is, I won't walk away until I know the truth." Claire stared at him for a long moment, her eyes flickering with uncertainty. Finally, she spoke in a low voice, one that carried the weight of years of secrets. "I never wanted you involved in this. I never wanted anyone to get hurt. But now that you know, now that you've seen me, seen what I've been doing, it's too late." Ryan's heart clenched. He had never seen Claire like this before. She was unraveling in front of him, her controlled exterior cracking under the pressure. "Tell me," he urged softly. "Please, tell me what's going on." Claire exhaled sharply and lowered her gaze, as if resigning herself to the inevitable. "I don't have a choice, Ryan. I've been working with them for years. The men you saw, they're part of a larger operation, one that I got caught up in when I was younger. They promised me safety, security, everything I'd ever needed. But it was a lie. It was all a lie." Ryan was silent, absorbing her words. What was she talking about? Who were these men? What kind of operation? "I was desperate," Claire continued, her voice trembling. "I had a family to protect, and I didn't know what else to do. I got involved with them, but once you're in, there's no getting out. They made sure of that." Ryan stepped forward, his eyes softening. "Claire, you don't have to do this. You can walk away. You can start over." She shook her head, her eyes filled with both pain and regret. "You don't understand. It's too late for me. And it's too late for you too. If you keep pushing, if you keep digging, they'll come for you. They'll come for everyone you care about. They're not just some small-time criminals. They control things, Ryan. Things far beyond what you think. People's lives, fortunes, and futures are in their hands, and they won't hesitate to destroy anyone who threatens their operation. Ryan was stunned, his mind racing with questions, but before he could speak, a voice from the other room interrupted them. "Claire, is everything all right?" The man's voice called out, cold and authoritarian. Ryan's pulse quickened. He glanced at Claire, but her face was pale, her lips pressed together in a tight line. He could see the conflict in her eyes. She wanted to protect him, but she was trapped in a situation that was bigger than either of them. "You need to leave," Claire whispered urgently. "Now, before they see you." But Ryan couldn't bring himself to walk away. Not now, not after everything he had learned. He had to confront the truth, for Claire and for himself. "I'm not leaving," he said firmly. "Not without answers, not without knowing what this is all about." Claire's eyes widened in panic. "You don't understand." But before she could finish, the door to the room slammed open and the three men entered. Their faces were expressionless, their eyes cold, calculating. The leader of the group, a tall man with dark hair and a scar running down his cheek, stared at Ryan, his gaze sharp. "Who's this?" the man asked, his voice icy. Ryan stood his ground, refusing to be intimidated. "I'm not leaving until Claire tells me the truth." The man's lips curled into a thin smile, but there was no warmth in it. "You're making a mistake, Mr. Matthews. You've no idea who you're dealing with." Ryan glanced at Claire, who was trembling, but she didn't speak. The look in her eyes told him everything he needed to know. She was scared, scared for him, for herself, for everything that was at stake. "You should have stayed out of this," the man said, his tone dark. "But now you're involved, and that's a problem we're going to have to solve." Ryan's breath caught in his chest as the man stepped forward, his hand reaching for the back of his jacket. Before Ryan could react, Claire moved quickly, stepping between him and the man. "No, please, don't. He doesn't know anything. He doesn't—" The man's gaze softened for just a moment, a flash of something almost human in his eyes, but then he hardened again, shaking his head. "You've been hiding this for far too long, Claire. You should have kept him away. You've put us all at risk." Ryan's mind was spinning. What was happening? Who were these people, and why was Claire so terrified of them? The man looked back at Ryan. "You think this is a game, don't you? You think you can just waltz in here and demand answers? But this isn't some corporate boardroom. This is the real world. And in the real world, people get hurt." Ryan swallowed hard, his heart pounding. "What are you going to do to me?" Man didn't answer right away. Instead, he took a step back, appraising Ryan like a predator circling its prey. Finally, he spoke. "We'll make sure you don't get in the way again," he said coldly. "But we won't hurt you. Not yet." Ryan's blood ran cold. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. This was real. This was happening. "You want answers?" the man continued, his eyes narrowing. "Then listen carefully. Claire is involved in something much bigger than you could ever imagine. And if you want to get out of here alive, you'll stop asking questions. You'll forget everything you think you know. Because if you don't—" The man let the sentence trail off, and for a moment, Ryan wasn't sure if he was being threatened or warned. But one thing was clear, his world had just changed forever.